He thought the worst part of his life was already behind him, sleeping on cold streets, being ignored like he didn't exist. A homeless black veteran with nothing left, but memories of a past he could barely afford to remember. Then one day a letter arrived that changed everything. An abandoned farm left in his name, for just $5. But when he stepped onto that broken land, something didn't feel right. The walls whispered secrets no one was supposed to find. Secrets that could turn everything upside down. What was really hidden inside that place? He had learned to live with invisibility. As a black veteran who once served his country, he returned expecting respect, stability, and a place to rebuild his life. Instead, he found silence. Doors that never opened, job applications that disappeared into nothing, and nights that stretched endlessly under cold streetlights. Over time, the uniformed pride he once carried was replaced by worn clothes, a tired body, and a routine built around survival rather than hope. Most days followed the same pattern, waking up early before the city fully moved, searching for small ways to get through another day, and avoiding the places where people looked straight through him as if he didn't exist. Yet despite everything, he never let go of the idea that life could still change, even if that belief felt smaller each year. One afternoon, everything shifted without warning. A sealed envelope arrived through an old legal channel addressed to him by name. Inside was information that made no sense at first, a forgotten inheritance tied to an abandoned farm in a distant rural area. The property had been transferred to him for a price so small it felt unreal. Just $5. At first it felt like a mistake, but something about the details was too precise to ignore. Against every doubt in his mind, he made a decision that would take him far away from the only world he knew. What he didn't realize was that the land waiting for him wasn't empty at all, and it had been hiding something for a very long time. The drive to the rural county felt longer than it should have. The further he left the city behind, the more the world around him seemed to shift, less noise, fewer people, and an uncomfortable sense that he didn't belong there. When he finally arrived, the land matched the description in the documents, but not in the way he had imagined. The abandoned farm stood like it had been forgotten by time itself. Broken fences leaned into the dirt. The house at the center looked hollow, as if it had been drained of life years ago. But it wasn't emptiness that made his steps slow. It was the feeling of being watched. From the moment he entered the nearby town to confirm the paperwork, the atmosphere changed. Conversations stopped when he walked in. Eyes followed him longer than necessary. The clerk behind the counter took too long to verify simple records, flipping through pages as if searching for a reason to delay him. Each passing minute felt heavier, as though his presence alone disrupted something unspoken. When he finally returned to the farm, things had shifted again. The front gate, which he clearly remembered pushing open earlier, now hung shut with a new lock that had not been there before. The wind carried no explanation. Only silence answered him. Walking around the property, he noticed subtle signs that didn't belong. Fresh footprints near the side of the house, faint scratches on old wood, and soil that looked recently disturbed despite years of abandonment. Something was not as untouched as it appeared. Inside the house, the air was thick and stale. Light struggled to pass through cracked windows, falling in uneven shapes across the floorboards. Every step made the structure groan as if it resisted being explored. Rooms were stripped bare, yet not entirely empty. Small inconsistencies began to appear. Planks that had been replaced more recently than the rest, sections of wall that sounded hollow when brushed against, and markings that seemed intentionally placed to guide attention away from certain areas. The deeper he moved through the house, the stronger the feeling became that someone had been here long before him, and possibly not left at all. Then came the first undeniable sign. A section of the wall near the back room had been disturbed, its surface uneven, almost hastily repaired. When he pressed against it, the wood gave a faint shift, revealing a gap behind it. Not large enough to see through, but enough to confirm that something had been concealed deliberately. Before he could investigate further, a sudden noise came from outside the house, slow movement across dry ground, approaching without urgency but with certainty. The silence of the farm broke instantly, replaced by something far more unsettling, the sense that he was no longer alone, and that whatever had been hidden here was now aware of him too. He stepped back from the wall the moment the sound outside grew louder. Not random footsteps, measured, intentional, circling the house like whoever it was already knew the layout. The air inside the abandoned farm suddenly felt tighter, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then came the knock. Not a polite warning, not hesitation, a command. 3 sharp hits on the front door. He didn't answer. A second later, the door handle shifted. Locked or not, someone was testing it like it belonged to them. His instincts from years in uniform kicked in immediately. Scan, assess, prepare. But there was no weapon in reach, no backup, no certainty about who was outside. Just him, alone in a house that already felt like it had been waiting for this moment. The lock snapped. The door swung open hard enough to slam against the wall, and light from outside cut across the dark interior. 2 figures stood in the doorway. Not rushed, not panicked, calm in a way that felt rehearsed. One of them looked directly at him, eyes steady, like he was something that didn't belong on that land. "You shouldn't be here," the man said flatly. No explanation, no question, just judgment. Before he could respond, another voice came from behind them, older, colder, carrying authority. That property was never meant to be transferred. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Papers, inheritance, legality, everything he had trusted suddenly felt unstable. His mind raced, trying to piece it together, but the tension in the room didn't allow space for logic. Only pressure, only threat. Then one of them stepped forward. Glancing toward the damaged wall he had been inspecting, that small movement confirmed everything. This wasn't about a mistake. It was about control, about keeping something buried. His chest tightened as realization set in. The inheritance wasn't a gift. It was a trigger. And by stepping onto this land, he had crossed into something far bigger and far more dangerous than a forgotten farm. Outside, more footsteps gathered, more voices, closing in. And in that moment, he understood whatever truth was hidden in these walls wasn't just valuable. It was something they were willing to silence him for. The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. For a moment, he stood still, caught between the voices outside and the truth, pressing in from inside the walls. But something shifted in him. Not fear disappearing, but fear being replaced by clarity. He made a choice. Instead of stepping back, he moved toward what had been hidden. The men outside didn't stop him immediately. They hesitated, just long enough for him to act. With shaking hands, he forced open the damaged section of the wall. Wood cracked. Dust exploded into the air. And behind it, the hidden space finally revealed itself. Inside were documents, old records, property transfers, names, dates, evidence of land being taken, sold and reassigned under systems that had erased people quietly, legally, and permanently. His breath caught as he realized this wasn't just about one farm. It was part of something much larger, decades of manipulation, targeting families who had no power to fight back. And then he understood why he had been chosen. A voice from outside called out again, louder this time, urgent. But he wasn't listening anymore. For the first time since arriving, the truth was no longer hidden behind silence or intimidation. It was in his hands. Sirens eventually broke the tension in the distance. Whether someone had finally reported the disturbance or whether the system itself had been forced to respond didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the story could no longer stay buried. When it was over, he didn't leave the same way he arrived. The farm was no longer just abandoned land. It was evidence. And he was no longer just a man who had nothing. He was a witness to something that others had tried to erase. But justice, even when revealed, doesn't erase what came before it. It only forces the world to look at it. And as he stood there, surrounded by broken walls and buried truth, one question remained heavier than everything else. How many more stories like his are still hidden, waiting for someone brave enough to open the wall?